Open Socrates, The Case for a Philosophical Life is a searching, deeply reflective work that presents the ancient figure of Socrates not simply as a historical icon or distant moralist, but as a living invitation, a model for how to live fully awake, courageously curious, and radically open. The book is not merely a biography of Socrates, nor a scholarly analysis of Platonic dialogues, but a call to readers to engage philosophically with their own lives, using Socrates as a guiding presence. The author, through a blend of historical insight, contemporary relevance, and existential urgency, frames Socrates as the prototype of the examined life. Socrates' commitment to questioning, to refusing the comfort of easy answers, and to living with intellectual honesty becomes the foundation of a broader argument, that philosophy is not an academic activity or intellectual luxury, but a mode of being that anyone can choose. To live philosophically, in this vision, means to be perpetually open. Open to challenge, to contradiction, to transformation. The book opens with the image of Socrates at his trial, calmly defending a life of inquiry before a jury that ultimately condemns him. This moment, perhaps the most famous in philosophical history, is not treated as martyrdom but as testament. Socrates' refusal to renounce his questioning, even under threat of death, reveals the depth of his commitment to a life shaped by reason and virtue. His death becomes less a tragedy than a mirror, forcing us to ask what we ourselves might be willing to risk in order to live honestly. What makes Socrates so compelling, the book argues, is not what he knew but how he lived. He claimed ignorance not as a rhetorical trick but as a spiritual stance. His, "I know that I know nothing," is not false humility but a declaration of epistemic humility. In contrast to the self-assured certainties of politicians, poets, and sophists, Socrates embraced not knowing as the beginning of wisdom. In this way, the book suggests, he modeled a form of openness that remains revolutionary. The idea of openness becomes the moral and intellectual thread that runs through the entire work. Socratic openness is not passive or naive, it is rigorous, courageous, and at times profoundly unsettling. It means being open to the possibility that your deepest beliefs may be wrong. It means submitting your assumptions to scrutiny, not just by others, but by yourself. This kind of openness is rare, difficult, and often painful, but the author insists it is essential to a truly human life. Socrates' dialogues, especially those captured by Plato, are reinterpreted in the book not as dusty texts but as living conversations. The author invites readers to inhabit them as real dramas of thought. Whether it is Euthyphro on the nature of piety, Crito on justice and obligation, or Apology on moral courage, each dialogue becomes a portal into the philosophical life. We are not meant to admire Socrates from afar but to enter into his questions, to let them trouble us, disorient us, and possibly reorient us. One of the book's great strengths is how it brings Socratic questioning into dialogue with modern life. The author explores how Socratic ideals challenge contemporary culture's obsession with opinion, certainty, and ideological entrenchment. In a world saturated with information but starved for wisdom, Socratic inquiry is presented as an antidote, an ethic of slowness, attentiveness, and deep reflection. The book dares us to unplug from the noise and turn inward. Not to withdraw, but to re-engage more thoughtfully. The emotional texture of the book is also noteworthy. Socrates is not portrayed as a cold logician but as a profoundly passionate seeker. His love of wisdom, philosophia, is treated as a kind of eros, a yearning for something beyond the self. The author explores how this eros is directed not just at abstract truth but at other people. Socratic dialogue, then, becomes an act of love, a shared striving for understanding that refuses to dominate or manipulate. At the heart of the philosophical life, the book argues, is a radical form of responsibility. Socrates did not preach from a distance. He walked the streets of Athens, engaged strangers, exposed hypocrisy, and ultimately accepted death rather than compromise his principles. To live philosophically is not to escape the world but to enter it more deeply, with integrity, self-awareness, and a commitment to truth even when it is inconvenient or costly. The book also explores the tensions and limits of Socratic living. What happens when questioning becomes destabilizing? When openness invites confusion or despair. The author does not shy away from these dangers but insists they are integral to the philosophical path. Like Socrates, the philosophical individual must learn to live with uncertainty, not as a failure of understanding, but as a mark of honest engagement. It is in this space of unknowing that genuine insight may emerge. The text draws on thinkers from various traditions, Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, Arendt, Iris Murdoch, to show how Socratic ideals have been refracted and reimagined through the centuries. Yet it never strays too far from the ground of everyday life. The philosophical life, in this book, is not for elites or specialists. It is for teachers, parents, artists, mechanics, anyone willing to ask real questions and live by the answers, however provisional they may be. Socrates' method is presented as a practice, not a doctrine. He leaves no system, no orthodoxy, only a way of being, dialogical, self-examining, morally grounded. The author emphasizes that we do not need to be ancient Greeks to follow Socrates, we need only the courage to be honest, the humility to not know, and the discipline to keep thinking. This practice of continual questioning becomes a spiritual exercise, one that shapes the soul more than the intellect alone. In one of the most moving sections, the book imagines what it would mean to live one's whole life as a Socratic experiment, not in pursuit of success or status, but of understanding. Such a life would likely appear strange in our hyper-efficient, goal-driven world. But it might also be deeply free. Socrates, the book reminds us, was perhaps the freest man Athens had ever known, not because he escaped consequences, but because he lived without fear of them. Ultimately, Open Socrates makes a compelling case that philosophy, rightly understood, is not about having the answers but living inside the questions. Socrates does not offer us a map, but a compass. He shows us how to turn toward truth, even when the path is unclear. His example remains relevant not because he knew everything, but because he was unafraid to admit how much he didn't know, and still persisted in the pursuit. The final impression is not of a man frozen in marble but of a human being vividly alive. Socrates becomes not a relic of the past but a companion for the present, a voice whispering into the noise of modern life, "Are you sure you know what you think you know? What kind of life are you really living? What, exactly, is your soul made of?" The invitation is unsettling, but in its honesty, it is liberating. And in answering it, we take our first steps into the philosophical life.